The ocean screamed. Not in words, but in a feral, bone-chilling roar that gnawed at her very soul. Waves slammed against the jagged ice like 1,000 fists striking a fragile body, and the wind, oh the wind, howled around her ears, a freezing lament that seemed to mock every heartbeat. She was sinking. No, not sinking, fighting, clawing, desperate. Her fingers scraped against the unforgiving ice, cutting her palms, leaving trails of red that stung like fire in the frozen air. Her lungs were on fire, screaming for breath that refused to come, while her chest heaved against the icy grip of the ocean that wanted nothing more than to drag her under. Every second felt like an eternity. Every breath stolen felt like a battle she wasn't sure she could win. Shards of memory flashed across her mind. The whispers of her old pack, the sneers, the accusations, the fear in their eyes when they saw her power, the silver flame they had tried to suppress. They had called her dangerous. They had called her cursed. And now, here she was, teetering on the edge of life and death, the ocean reflecting every fear she had ever been forced to swallow. But she was not just afraid. No, fear alone could not define her. Anger burned beneath it, raw and untamed, a fire she could barely control, flickering in her chest like the first spark of lightning. Her power, it stirred, uneasy and impatient, a silver glow trembling in her iris as she gasped, fighting for her life. She had no time to fully control it, and yet it called to her, whispering through the chaos that she was not alone, that she could survive, that she must. Around her, the ocean betrayed the remnants of her pack. Wolves, some broken, some trapped under ice, floundered and struggled, their eyes wide, bodies slick with freezing water. She could see their fear mirrored her own, but also a silent plea, a desperate hope that someone, anyone, would fight for them. And maybe she was that someone, though the thought seemed laughable in the cruel cold. Her teeth chattered, her bones ached, and her muscles screamed, but still she moved, dragging herself across the ice, each movement a test of will against the world that had turned its face toward her. The storm had its own rhythm, cruel and chaotic, echoing her inner turmoil. Gusts ripped through her hair, whipped her soaked clothing against her body, and lashed at her skin like tiny knives. The ocean roared beneath her, massive waves curling and crashing as though testing her resolve, daring her to fail. Each wave brought with it a memory she could not escape, the sharp sting of rejection, the coldness of those who had once claimed to love her, the crushing weight of exile. Her heart beat wildly, unsteady but stubborn, refusing to yield. Silver flames danced across her irises, small, tremulous flickers that threatened to consume more than the darkness around her. Her claws scraped the ice again, and the glow pulsed, a warning and a promise all at once. She did not yet know how to harness it fully, could barely bear the strength that surged through her, but she felt it deep in her bones, in her blood, in her very soul. She could not die here. Not like this. Not without fighting with every ounce of herself. Every broken, trembling part of herself. Her eyes caught a movement, a flash of fur in the dark waves, a fellow wolf struggling against the ice. She lunged, teeth bared, claws gripping, hands slicing through icy water to pull her packmate free. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt in slow motion, the roaring wind fading into silence as she focused on the one life she could reach, the one soul she could save. Her fingers closed around fur, the body slick and trembling, and she dragged it onto solid ice, collapsing beside it, gasping, shivering violently. She did not care about herself. Not now. She cared only for the lives around her, for the souls she had sworn, in some unspoken way, to protect. And yet, even as her body burned and shook, even as the world seemed determined to swallow her whole, the silver flame within her flickered stronger, responding to her determination, responding to the need, the fear, the anger, the love she didn't know she still carried. It was unstable, yes. Well, yes. But it was hers, and for the first time in a long time she welcomed the pulse of it through her veins. She felt the connection, raw, ancient, almost sacred, to the ocean, to the storm, to the pack she had lost and the lives she might still save. Somewhere above the roar of waves and wind, her mind caught a sliver of thought, fragile but insistent. You are not finished yet. And she clung to it like a lifeline, clawing her way up another ridge of ice, pulling another struggling wolf from the ocean's grasp. Her arms screamed in protest, her muscles threatening to collapse, but she did not stop. Every fiber of her being was focused on survival, on saving them, on not letting the darkness win. The cold bit at her cheeks, stung her lips, burned her lungs with every desperate gasp. Her hair clung to her face in icy tangles. Frost coated her skin. Every nerve screamed in protest, yet she pressed on. She could feel the ocean beneath her like a living thing, relentless, merciless, indifferent, and she rose above it anyway, defying its weight, its cold, its silence. And just as despair threatened to take her completely, she caught sight of a glimmer on the horizon. A shadow moving against the storm, a shape that seemed almost impossibly solid in the chaos. Something, or someone was coming. Her pulse jumped, half hope, half fear. Could it be rescue? Or was it another danger? She could not tell, but the mere thought sent a surge through her body, silver flame licking the edges of her vision. She did not know if she could survive the storm, but she knew in that moment that she would not let herself be defeated. Not yet. Not when there was still a chance to fight, still a chance to save those she loved. Before the next wave could drag her under, before the icy water could claim her lungs, she whispered into the storm, a promise more than a prayer. I am not done. I will not let this end like this. Not today. Not ever. And somewhere in that roaring, unforgiving storm, the world seemed to pause, just for a heartbeat, as though acknowledging her defiance. The silver flame flared brighter, the ice beneath her hands shifted, and she felt for the first time in a long time that even here at the edge of despair she might just survive. He might just save them all. Her teeth clenched. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Her body shivered violently, but her spirit roared louder than the ocean itself. And she rose again, pulling another wolf from the waves, refusing to yield. She could feel every heartbeat, every gasp, every flicker of fear and courage intertwining, and it was enough. Enough to keep her moving, enough to keep her fighting. Even in the chaos, even in the storm, even in the edge of death itself, she shone. A small, trembling, flickering light in a world determined to snuff her out. And yet it was her light, and it was strong, stronger than she knew, stronger than the storm, stronger than the ice and the cold and the fear. The ocean would not break her. Not today. Not while there was still breath in her lungs. Not while there was still silver fire in her eyes. Not while there was still a chance to fight. Before we dive deeper into this storm, before the world drags her further into chaos, take a moment to subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, where every heartbeat matters and every tale burns. Because this is only the beginning. The storm did not relent. The wind tore at her hair, stung her cheeks, and clawed at her soaked skin as though it wanted to shred her entirely. And yet, through the blinding spray of salt water, through the blur of ice and shadow, she saw him. He emerged from the mist like a predator sculpted from the night itself. Massive, powerful, moving with a fluid grace that betrayed both strength and danger. His silhouette was sharp against the dim, roiling sky, a shadow that carried both promise and threat. And yet, when his gaze fell on her struggling form, there was a softness there, a flicker of recognition, a hesitation that softened the edges of his presence. She felt it immediately, even through the pounding of her heart, even through the numbing cold. He knew her. He had been watching. She could feel it in the way his eyes lingered, calculating and searching, aware of her power, aware of the chaos that clung to her like mist. And in that awareness there was understanding. Not compassion exactly, not yet, but a recognition that sent a strange warmth crawling through her chest. A warning. Maybe hope. The waves crashed between them, but he moved with a purpose that defied the ocean itself. Every step was deliberate, controlled, predatory, yet protective, and she could see it in the set of his shoulders, the tension in his arms. The way he approached was not just a rescue. It was a challenge, a statement. He was telling her silently, I see you. And I will decide whether you survive. He reached the edge of the ice, the point where her trembling fingers barely clung to the jagged surface. His hand shot out, massive and sure, and for a moment she froze. Part of her wanted to recoil, to sink beneath the waves and vanish into the storm, because trust had never been her ally. Every time she had let someone close, every time she had shown her true strength, they had turned. Exiled. Rejected. Feared. And yet she saw something in his eyes, a curiosity, a respect, and perhaps something dangerous, an acknowledgement that her strength was not weakness, that her power, as wild and uncontrolled as it was a force he could not ignore. You weren't meant to be out here alone, he said, his voice low, rumbling, carrying over the roar of the ocean in a way that made her heart stutter. Her chest heaved, cold water dripping from her hair, freezing against her skin, and her mind screamed a warning. Can I trust him? Will he betray me just like the others? She hesitated, claws scraping the ice, silver flames flickering in her eyes, wild and unrestrained, ready to lash out if he moved too fast, if his intent proved false. And then his hand was there, closer now, brushing against hers with the promise of stability. Thought. Warm despite the cold, though not overly so, measured, intentional. Not a savior, not yet. Just a presence she could anchor to, if only for a heartbeat. He pulled her from the icy water with a strength that seemed impossible, yet not cruel. He did not squeeze too hard, did not make her feel weak. And as her body was lifted from the freezing depths, she felt herself trembling, not entirely from cold, but from the shock of contact, from the strange tug at her chest that spoke of something she did not yet understand. Furious. But alongside it something else. Something dangerous. Something like attraction. Her lungs burned as she gasped for air, each breath ragged, each inhale a defiance against the ocean that had tried to claim her. And he held her steady, his presence a shield against the storm's fury. His eyes never left hers, dark and searching, trying to measure the depth of her strength, the weight of her fear, the edges of the power she barely controlled. "You're stronger than they told me," he murmured, voice low enough that only she could hear it over the storm. "But you shouldn't have to fight alone." She blinked, a shiver running through her, not from the cold but from the intensity of his gaze. Every instinct in her screamed to push away, to vanish into the chaos, to hide the flicker of silver flames in her eyes, to deny the pull she felt. And yet every other instinct, buried beneath years of fear and exile, whispered, "Maybe this is someone who can see you, all of you, and not run." Her fingers itched, trembling on the edge of his arm. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to lean on him even for a moment, even as her body ached and her mind screamed caution? Every betrayal she had known in the past rose like a tide, threatening to drag her under again. And yet the rhythm of his heartbeat, the solid certainty in his presence, the undeniable power that radiated from him, it was magnetic. Drawn to it, pulled closer despite her better judgment. The storm seemed to pause just slightly, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, watching. Waves still crashed, wind still roared, but there was a space, a fragile, suspended moment, between them, charged with tension, heavy with unspoken questions. She felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and something she did not yet have words for. She could almost sense the weight of his own demons, the shadows he carried with him, the battles he had fought alone. It was as if their pain mirrored each other across the storm, two souls battered but unbroken, colliding in the chaos and recognizing a kindred fire. "You're not like them," he said, a note of caution threading through the words, almost a warning, almost an acknowledgement. "And I won't run." Her chest tightened. The truth of her life, the betrayals, the exile, the fear, made it hard to breathe. But somehow, against the cold, against the storm, against everything that had ever told her she was unworthy, she felt a spark of hope. A dangerous, frightening hope that someone finally might understand her, might see her as she was, might not recoil from the silver flames that danced just beneath her skin. And then the wind tore harder, a wave of cold and salt that stole her breath, but he held her tighter, not suffocating, not controlling, just there. A presence that anchored her, that reminded her she could survive, that whispered silently, "You don't have to do this alone." Her mind flitted, as it always did, to every warning she had been given in her life. Trust no one. Show no weakness. Hide your strength. Protect yourself. And yet, looking into those dark, conflicted eyes, she felt the temptation to defy every lesson she had ever learned. Perhaps some risks were worth taking. Perhaps some fire could be met with fire, and not be burned. Her silver flames flared again, brighter now, responding to the tension, the fear, the pull, the strange recognition that danced between them. And he did not flinch. He did not step back. He simply held her, steady against the chaos, a tether to the impossible in the midst of annihilation. "You survived," he said finally, almost a statement of awe, almost a question she did not need to answer. "And you're still here." Her teeth chattered, not from cold, but from the shiver that ran through her entire being, the mixture of fear and wonder, the violent, unrelenting storm of emotion that she barely had the strength to comprehend. And yet, for the first time in a long time, she did not feel entirely alone. She did not feel entirely powerless. She had survived the ocean. She had survived herself. And now, in the presence of someone who could match her strength, who could see her, who might even understand her, she felt a tiny, dangerous spark of possibility. A spark that might just grow into a fire neither of them could control. Even as the storm began to fade, leaving the taste of salt and the sting of icy wind on her skin, she could not let herself breathe. Not fully. Not yet. Her body shivered violently, teeth chattering, muscles trembling from exhaustion, but her mind was already elsewhere, spiraling through the shadows of her past. Every droplet of freezing water that dripped from her hair felt like a reminder. A reminder that she had survived before, yes, but always at a cost. Always at the cost of someone else, someone she had failed to protect. Her mind flickered back, unwilling but unstoppable, to the pack she had once called family. The faces were sharp in her memory, twisted with fear and disdain. The whispers, soft at first, had grown into a chorus she could never escape. Too dangerous. Accursed. She will destroy us all. She had heard those words repeated so often that they had settled into her bones, a frozen weight she carried everywhere. And she had believed them, even when every fiber of her being screamed that she was more than the fear of others. There had been moments, small, fleeting but impossible to forget, where her power had betrayed her. A silver flame flickered in anger or panic, and suddenly a packmate's fur had singed, or a wave had thrown someone into danger. She had tried to control it, had tried to hide it, but power like hers did not obey. It roared and pulsed, a living thing, untamed and hungry, reflecting every crack in her heart, every wound she had ever carried. Am I meant to save, or destroy? The question haunted her even now as she huddled against the rock he had helped her reach. It was not just survival that weighed on her. It was the constant tension between the fire inside her and the fear it inspired in others. She had wanted so desperately to belong, to be accepted, to have her strength admired rather than feared. And every failure, every accident, had been proof that maybe she had no right to hope at all. The wind still whipped around her, cold and relentless, but now it felt quieter than before, almost respectful, as if it recognized the turmoil within her. She pulled her knees to her chest, letting herself shiver, letting herself think, letting herself feel. And in that silence the memories returned. Not just the fear, but the moments she had fought to protect others, the flashes of courage that had gone unseen, unpraised. She remembered the night she had first lost control, how it had begun as a spark of anger at being cornered, how the silver flame had surged from her chest, uncontrolled, consuming everything nearby. Wolves she had grown up with had screamed, their eyes wide with terror, and she had felt the weight of their fear crush her from the inside out. She had never hurt them intentionally, not truly, but power that lived in your blood did not always listen to your mind, and that night had been proof enough. From that moment she had learned to hide, not just her strength but herself. And yet here he was, the male lead, standing close enough that she could feel his presence like heat against frost, his dark eyes searching her face, patient, unwavering. And unlike the others, he did not flinch at the flicker of silver flame in her gaze. He did not shrink from the storm that raged inside her, nor did he offer pity. Though he seemed intrigued, respectful. And in that moment, a strange warmth slithered through her chest, soft but insistent. Perhaps not everyone will see me as a weapon. His presence was both comforting and unnerving. She had spent years trusting no one, revealing nothing, building walls stronger than ice and fire combined. And yet, something in the way he watched her, with patience and a kind of quiet intensity, chipped at those walls, forcing her to consider that maybe, just maybe, someone could see the real her without fear, without judgment. Her mind wandered further, to secrets even she had barely dared to speak aloud. The bloodline she had inherited, the forbidden transformations whispered about in dark corners of pack history, the silver flame that was both gift and curse, they were all pieces of a puzzle she had never dared to complete. And now, confronted with the presence of someone who could match her intensity, who could perhaps even understand the depth of what she carried, the puzzle felt less like a burden and more like a map. The ocean roared below, waves slapping against ice, reminding her that danger was never far away, that the storm could rise again at any moment. But now she was anchored. Not by land, not by safety, but by the unspoken connection forming in the silence between her and him. Her chest tightened as she realized she had not felt this, tethered, in years. Not since exile. Not since the pack had cast her out for the very powers they now whispered about in fear. She shivered again, but it was not entirely from cold. The spark of trust, small and fragile, flickered through her bones like a gentle flame. She did not know if it would survive the next wave, the next challenge, the next betrayal. But for the first time in so long she allowed herself to hope. Allowed herself to imagine that her strength, her silver flame, could be something more than a curse. Could be the very thing that saved those she loved and perhaps saved her as well. And yet shadows lingered. Her inner torment was never far, gnawing at her even as she leaned ever so slightly into the warmth of his presence. Can I truly trust him? Will he see my power and recoil as the others always have? Or worse, will he try to control me to bend me to his will? Each thought was a blade, cutting into the fragile peace she had just begun to taste. The storm had passed, but the echoes remained, the fear, the pain, the self-doubt. She drew a shaky breath, shivering violently, silver flames dancing faintly in her eyes, reflecting both the turmoil and the potential within her. And he watched, silent, patient, understanding that she needed this space, that she needed to face herself before facing the world again. His presence alone spoke volumes, though he said nothing. In the quiet that stretched between the crash of waves and the whisper of wind, he offered her something the pack never had: acknowledgement, recognition, and the dangerous, frightening possibility that someone could care about the girl behind the fire, not just the fire itself. Her thoughts drifted, tangled and conflicted, back to the pack that had cast her out. The exiled nights spent in forests alone, the loneliness that had carved deep canyons in her heart, the whispered warnings she had learned to believe. She remembered the anger, the shame, the sorrow that had accompanied every silver flame that burst uncontrolled. And she remembered the way she had vowed never to let it control her completely, not again. But now she faced a choice: trust or retreat, hope or self-preservation. She had been trained to survive, to hide, to isolate herself until no one could be hurt by her power. And yet, as she looked at him, his dark eyes fixed on hers, unwavering, unafraid, she felt that old instinct falter, as if her heart, stubborn and reckless, were daring her to take a step she had never allowed herself to take. It was terrifying. Terrifying and exhilarating. She felt the familiar burn of fear at the edge of her chest, but beneath it something else stirred. A courage, quiet and dangerous, fragile and untested, like the first spark of dawn across a frozen sky. And though she could not name it yet, she sensed that this spark, combined with the fire she already carried, might be the thing that could reshape everything she thought she knew about herself. The ocean roared, waves clawing at the ice. The wind screamed, rattling against her ears. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt a strange calm settle in the hollow of her chest. Not complete calm, not foolish peace, but a momentary clarity, a fleeting understanding, that perhaps her power, her fire, her exile, her pain, they were not her curse. Perhaps they were the very thing that would allow her to rise, to fight, to reclaim the life she had been denied. And in the silence between heartbeats, between silver flames and shadowed memories, she allowed herself a single dangerous thought: maybe I can trust him. Maybe he won't run. Maybe, just maybe, I'm not alone anymore. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean but still raw, still trembling with the echoes of chaos. She and him moved through the night, their footsteps muffled against the slick, moss-covered ground. The forest seemed alive, breathing around them in the pale light of a trembling moon that spilled silver across frozen leaves. Every shadow seemed deeper, every rustle of wind more deliberate, as if the trees themselves whispered secrets meant only for her. Her legs burned with fatigue, muscles screaming from the exertion, from the cold, from the very act of survival. But even as her body quivered, her mind remained alert, tense, pulling in every sound, every movement, every flicker of the silver flame in her eyes. She could feel it now, pulsing stronger in the presence of the forest, responding to something ancient buried beneath the roots and soil, beneath the stars themselves. He walked beside her, silent, measured, yet every step spoke of power restrained. The air around him carried authority, danger, and something softer, a fascination he could not hide, something almost reverent. He glanced at her occasionally, those dark eyes scanning her, reading her, weighing her in a way that made her pulse jump, made her stomach knot with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and something dangerous, unspoken. The path led them deeper into the forest, toward a place she had only ever heard about in whispered legends. The sacred grove where the old magic lingered, where the ancestors of the wolf packs had first bound the elemental forces to the earth and the ocean. Her heart hammered at the thought, at the realization that she was about to step into a place that had shaped destinies, a place that had shaped powers far greater than hers. And yet she knew, instinctively, that the pull she felt, the tug in her chest, the silver fire that coursed through her veins, was guiding her here toward something inevitable. The first signs appeared before she could even speak. A circle of ancient stones, slick with dew, arranged with deliberate care beneath the moonlight. She felt the air thicken, electric and heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Wolf spirits flickered along the edges of her vision, translucent, shimmering, their eyes glinting with knowledge she could not yet grasp. They were neither hostile nor welcoming, merely watching, waiting to see how she would respond, if she would rise or falter. She shivered, not from cold but from the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. The whispers of the past echoed faintly in her mind. The one with the mark will either bind or break us. She did not understand fully, did not yet know the depth of the prophecy, but the words burned in her consciousness like fire on ice. Bind or break us. And she could feel deep in her bones that she carried that weight. That she was, somehow, the axis upon which everything turned, though she was not yet ready, not yet worthy, not yet strong enough. The male lead moved closer, silent, but she felt him there, a tether against the vast emptiness of the grove. "You feel it too," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, as if speaking louder might shatter the moment. "It's alive here. Everything responds to you. Be careful." But his gaze lingered on her, dark and awestruck. "Be mindful. Not everything that bows is friendly. Not everything that flees is afraid." She swallowed, throat dry, eyes tracing the ancient inscriptions carved into the stones. They glowed faintly under her silver flames, symbols she could not yet read, yet understood instinctively. Shapes of wolves entwined with waves, crescents and flames. It was like staring into the history of her bloodline, into the stories of ancestors who had wielded powers she had only begun to glimpse. And then she felt it. The pull, subtle at first, a tug in her chest that made her silver flames flare brighter, reflecting on the stones, reflecting in the water that pooled between the rocks. The wolves in her vision shifted. Some bowed, heads lowered, submission offered in instinctive respect. Others growled, tense, as if sensing the potential for chaos, sensing the power she had barely begun to control. The forest responded too, leaves rustling in patterns she could almost read, shadows bending toward her, almost protective, almost reverent. She drew a trembling breath. "Why me?" she whispered almost to herself. The words barely left her lips before the wind seemed to answer, carrying the faintest echo of voices she did not know, voices older than memory. "Because you carry what others could not. Because you are the flame they feared and the tide they cannot hold. You are the one." He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, grounding, steadying, and she felt the jolt of warmth, human warmth, grounding her in a world that otherwise felt unreal, mystical, overwhelming. "Do not underestimate yourself," he said quietly. "The forest, the stones, the spirits, they respond because you are worthy. Even if you cannot see it yet." But she did see it, in fragments, flickers of possibility, glimpses of the fire that could rise fully in her, glimpses of control and chaos intertwined. Her chest tightened with fear and exhilaration. If I am the one, if I am truly the one, can I bear the weight? Can I survive it? Or will I destroy everything I love? The question burned hotter than the silver flame dancing in her eyes. The male lead's gaze did not waver. He crouched slightly, gesturing toward the largest stone, where the symbols shimmered the brightest. "Step closer," he said, cautious but insistent. "The closer you are, the more you will feel the pull. The truth of your power. But be ready, it will test you." Her breath caught. Her legs shook as she approached, each step deliberate, heart hammering in her chest. And the moment she reached the stone, the air shifted. The silver flames flared uncontrollably, licking the edges of her vision, illuminating the inscriptions in a radiant glow. The wolf spirits moved closer, circling, some bowing, some growling, as if testing her, as if gauging whether she was ready to claim the legacy that had been hers by blood but not yet by mastery. A rush of sensations hit her all at once. The salt tang of the ocean carried in the breeze, the whisper of leaves overhead, the cold bite of stone beneath her fingers, the pulse of energy in the earth beneath her feet. She could feel it all. The magic, the history, the destiny pressing down on her, and she faltered for the first time, doubting her ability to rise to it. "You feel it," he said softly, almost more to himself than to her. "The prophecy is not a promise. It is a challenge. It will take everything you have, and then demand more. But I swear, I will be here. Every step, every breath, every moment you question yourself." She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to lean on that tether of reassurance, yet the weight of the prophecy pressed too heavily. The words echoed in her mind, "The one with the mark will either bind or break us." Could she bear that? Could she carry it? Or was she destined to fail, to let the fire consume her, to let the ocean rise and claim her as it had claimed others before? And still, as fear warred with hope, she felt the pull, the undeniable tug of destiny, of lineage, of power waiting to be claimed. Her silver flames danced brighter, responding to the energy of the grove, licking the edges of the ancient inscriptions, coiling around her like sentient fire. The wolf spirits moved in perfect synchrony with the rhythm of her heartbeat, circling closer, a silent chorus of approval, warning, and challenge. "You are more than you know," he murmured, his voice carrying over the subtle rustle of the forest. "More than they feared. More than they cast out. You are everything they never wanted to face. And yet, perhaps everything they needed." She swallowed hard, eyes wide, chest tightening. The silver flames pulsed, shadows stretching and bending around her, the stone carvings glowing in response, as though acknowledging her presence, acknowledging the spark of power that had always been hers, unclaimed, untamed. And as she stood there, trembling, heart pounding, spirit raw, she understood one terrifying, exhilarating truth. The prophecy was not just words. It was a living, breathing challenge. And she was at its center. The moonlight shifted, clouds parting to spill silver across the grove, illuminating the stones, the spirits, the power that surged through her veins. Wolves in the distance howled in resonance, a deep, haunting song that vibrated in her chest, confirming what she already sensed. She was not merely a survivor. She was not merely exiled. She was the fulcrum of something far greater, a force ancient and unstoppable, and she could feel, deep in her bones, that the journey ahead would demand everything she had, and perhaps everything she would become. And through it all, he remained beside her, dark eyes unwavering, a tether of humanity in the midst of something far beyond comprehension. He did not offer false comfort. He did not coddle. He merely observed, guiding where necessary, respecting the fire and the storm and the destiny that intertwined with her very blood. And she, trembling, terrified, exhilarated, allowed herself finally to step fully into the pole, to acknowledge the spark of fate igniting within her. The silver flames flared, brighter than ever, reflecting in the stones, the water, the eyes of spirits circling, and in that luminous, shivering moment, she understood that she could no longer run from what she was meant to become. The grove, once quiet, mystical, and brimming with the hum of ancestral magic, erupted into chaos. A single shadow fell across the moonlit stones, dark and heavy, as if the night itself had come alive with intent to destroy. And then another and another, until the sacred circle was surrounded, rival alphas, their faces twisted in scorn and aggression, packs of wolves snarling behind them, teeth bared, claws digging into frozen earth, the scent of fury sharp in the air. She froze, breath catching in her chest. Silver flames flickered uncontrollably in her eyes, responding to the surge of threat and adrenaline. Her hands trembled, her claws itching to respond, to lash out, to protect not just herself, but the fragile pack of wolves who had trusted her presence tonight. Waves of instinct, inherited from centuries of shifter ancestors, collided with fear, doubt, and unbridled power. "Enough," one alpha barked, voice slicing through the wind like steel. "You have no right here. You were warned. You are a danger to all of us." Her chest tightened. Those words, so familiar, cut deeper than any claw could. Danger. Always feared, always hated. She had heard them for years, carried them like chains on her shoulders, and yet tonight she felt something else stir. A defiance, raw and unrelenting. The male lead stepped forward, placing himself between her and the advancing threat, his presence a dark shield, unwavering despite the dozens of eyes fixed on him with suspicion and malice. "She belongs here," he said, low, rumbling, but it carried over the uproar like a single strike of authority. "Do not mistake power for threat. Do not mistake fear for wisdom." But the dissenters were relentless. Shadow beasts, summoned by malice or desperation, lunged from the darkness, their forms twisted, sinew glinting in moonlight. Wolves scattered, yipping, howling, the air thick with tension and panic. Silver flames surged around her again, brighter, almost uncontrollable, licking at the edges of the stone circle, coiling around her as if alive. She could feel the energy of the grove feeding her power, amplifying it, making her tremble with both awe and fear. Her hands moved almost instinctively, fingers spreading, trying to contain the surge of energy. Waves of ice and flame collided, freezing ocean spray whipping across the ritual site, wolves sliding and struggling to regain footing. She could see one wolf trapped in a surge of the frozen wave, eyes wide with terror, and she lunged, silver flame blasting outward, shattering ice in a blinding spray, freeing the creature just in time. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she did not stop, could not stop. The male lead moved beside her, claws slashing, teeth bared, his own presence a dark tide of force and precision, protecting where she faltered, guiding where she overextended. And yet, even as they fought side by side, he caught her gaze, the mixture of fear and determination in her eyes, and for a moment, the chaos of battle faded into something more intimate, more electric. He saw her, truly saw her, not just the flames, not just the danger, but the courage that refused to break even when the world tried to crush her. A rival alpha roared, leaping toward her with teeth glinting, claws extended, but the silver flames flared, coiling around her like a serpent, a shield of raw power and instinct. She could feel herself trembling, power threatening to spill beyond control, yet somehow the male lead's presence, his grounding, kept her tethered, gave her the tiniest thread of balance in a maelstrom that could have swallowed her whole. "You will leave," one voice shouted, authoritative, echoing through the grove, carried by the wind and the fear in the wolves around them. "This is not your place. You are not welcome here. You endanger us all." Her chest constricted. Her heart ached, not from exhaustion, not from the cold, but from betrayal, from rejection, from the familiar sting of exile, branded into her soul once again. And yet, in the pit of that hurt, a spark ignited. "I will not run. I will not bow. They may fear me, despise me, even hate me, but I will return stronger. And they will remember my name." The male lead's hand brushed hers for the briefest instant, grounding her, steadying her, reminding her she was not alone, even as the pack's fury surged like tidal waves. His dark eyes met hers, conflicted, torn between duty and something far deeper. "I can't," he began, voice tight, almost breaking under the weight of loyalty to his pack and the pull of his heart. But she shook her head, silver flames flaring higher, defiance burning hotter than the cold night. "You don't have to fight for me," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You only need to remember this moment. I will return. And next time, they will see what I truly am." The words hung in the air, a vow etched in fire and ice, and for a heartbeat, the grove itself seemed to pause, even the wolves sensing the promise in her tone. Sparks of silver flame danced along her fingertips, tracing the air, illuminating the fear and awe in the eyes of the surrounding pack. Some wolves lowered their heads in cautious respect, others growled, tension coiling like a spring, unsure of whether to flee or fight. The male lead's jaw tightened, torn between stepping in and allowing her to rise fully in her power, and remaining loyal to the pack he had sworn to protect. Every muscle in his body screamed for compromise, for control, for intervention, but he recognized in that moment that this was her battle. Her test. Her choice. A shadow beast lunged again, massive, black as midnight, teeth snapping inches from her. She reacted instinctively, silver flames erupting like liquid light, blasting the creature backward. Ice formed where flame touched water, freezing the creature's momentum, buying her moments she did not know if she could sustain. Wolves yipped and shifted, some emboldened, some terrified, caught between instinct and awe. And then it was over, or at least the threat relented enough for a tense pause. The rival alphas stepped back, scowls twisting, whispers of fear and warning filling the air. "Leave," one said more quietly now, almost reluctantly, "before this power destroys everything we built." He did not hesitate. Not fully. She backed away, every step deliberate, every pulse of silver flame a promise. Her chest heaved, lungs burning, exhaustion weighing on her like lead. But she held her head high, eyes meeting the male lead's one final time before she turned. "I will return. I will master this. I will make them remember." The grove, still trembling with residual magic, seemed to acknowledge the vow, echoing faintly with whispers of ancestors long gone, wolves long departed, spirits of fire and water that had witnessed the rise of many. and perhaps the emergence of the one who could finally bind or break them all. The male lead remained silent, dark eyes haunted by the choices forced upon him. Loyalty, love, duty, all tangled in ways he could not yet untangle. And as she disappeared into the shadows of the forest, her silver flames dimming only slightly in the distance, he could not stop the ache in his chest, the tension between what he had sworn to protect and the pull he could not deny. She vanished into the night, but her vow echoed in the wind, carried across frozen streams and through the howl of distant wolves. I will return stronger, and they will remember my name. And in the silence that followed, the grove seemed to shiver in anticipation, as if the earth itself waited for her return, for the full rise of the fire that had just begun to burn in the heart of a girl who had survived storms, oceans, exile, and now the first clash of a world determined to test her every limit. The forest seemed different now, quieter in a way that made the air itself feel tender. The chaos of the clash still hummed faintly in her chest, a persistent reminder of the world that had rejected her, yet in the shadows of this secluded clearing, under the watch of silver moonlight and protective trees, she could almost breathe again. The male lead guided her gently, every movement deliberate, cautious, as if afraid to shatter the fragile balance of trust she had begun to offer. They arrived at a hidden cave, tucked beneath the roots of an ancient tree, its entrance masked by hanging moss and the curl of mist drifting from the river nearby. Inside, the warmth of a small fire flickered, casting shadows that danced across the jagged stone walls. The smoke carried a faint, earthy scent, mingling with the crisp forest air, curling around her senses in a way that made her chest tighten with something she hadn't felt in years: safety. He crouched near the fire, dark eyes reflecting the flames, and gestured for her to sit across from him. "You need rest," he said softly, voice low, rough at the edges but gentle in intent. "I can't force you to stay calm, but the wolves, the world, they will wait. Here, just breathe. Just be." She hesitated, muscles stiff, nerves taut like bowstrings. Trust was not something given lightly. Years of rejection had carved deep trenches in her heart, each one a warning. Do not rely on anyone. Do not allow yourself to hope. Do not let them see the fire inside. And yet he was patient, not demanding, not judging. Just present. His quiet confidence wrapped around her like a shield, grounding her trembling form even as the silver flame flickered faintly in her eyes, reflections of power that never fully slept. I almost lost control today," she whispered, voice brittle, almost drowned in the sound of the fire's crackle. "The waves, the wolves. I could have." She swallowed hard, chest rising and falling rapidly, as if the very act of speaking threatened to pull the storm from inside her. "I could have destroyed everything." He shifted closer, still cautious, still careful not to crowd her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle strength that seemed to anchor the ground beneath her. "I saw," he said quietly. "And yet you didn't. You saved them. Every wolf, every life in the water. You controlled what you could. You are stronger than you realize." She looked away, gaze tracing the jagged wall, the flickering shadows, the way the firelight danced in waves over the rough stone. "Strong," she murmured. "They all call me dangerous, cursed, unworthy. How can saving a few lives make me anything more than what they say I am?" He reached forward then, just a hand hovering near hers, a promise unspoken. "Because I see all of you," he whispered, voice low, intimate, carrying a weight that made her chest ache. "Even the parts you hide. Even the fear, the doubt, the fire you're afraid to unleash. I see it and I don't flinch. I don't run." Her pulse spiked, breath catching. Those words, simple yet heavy, stirred something deep within her. The fire in her chest, the silver flame in her eyes, the tremor in her fingers, they all responded to his presence, to the acknowledgement that she could be seen without fear, without judgment. She had never experienced this before. Someone who recognized the storm inside her and offered not control but companionship. For a long moment, silence hung between them, charged and electric. The wolves outside shifted, their soft yips and low growls barely audible over the fire crackling, almost like witnesses to this delicate, fragile moment. And she realized with a jolt that she had not just survived the storm outside, she was surviving something far more dangerous. The possibility of being understood, being wanted, being trusted. "I've seen pain," he murmured, his gaze dark and reflective, flickering like the flames. I've carried scars you wouldn't believe. But I've learned, sometimes the only way to survive is to trust someone. Even if just for a moment. Even if it scares you. Her throat tightened. The weight of her own confession, long buried, threatened to spill. She swallowed, hands clenching in her lap. I fear myself, she admitted, voice trembling. I fear losing control. Losing everything and everyone I care about, because of what I am. Because of the power I can't fully control. He leaned closer, careful, deliberate, as if the slightest motion could shatter her trust. His dark eyes held hers, unwavering, patient. I know, he said softly. And I will not leave. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. You are not alone in this. Not while I breathe. She felt something unravel in her chest, a tension held for years, a knot of fear and loneliness loosening just enough to breathe. The firelight danced across his face, shadows making him seem both predatory and tender, a dangerous combination that drew her in even as caution whispered in the back of her mind. Her gaze flicked to his lips, and for the briefest moment, the world narrowed to nothing but heat, proximity, and the unspoken pull between them. She could feel the almost tangible tension, the magnetic charge in the air, and it took every ounce of control not to lean forward, not to cross the space between them and risk everything in a single dangerous breath. He shifted slightly, reading the tension in her posture, the hesitation in her gaze. You don't have to, he murmured, voice low, intimate, almost a whisper against the rustle of the fire and the distant howl of wolves. I won't force it. Not yet. Not until you're ready. But, his voice caught faintly, a rare crack in the armor. I want you to know I see you. All of you. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let herself consider the possibility of connection without fear, without judgment. I want to trust you, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper, trembling with vulnerability and hope. But I don't know if I can. He reached out again, fingertips brushing hers lightly, a whisper of contact that sent shivers down her spine. Then we start here, he said softly. Step by step. Moment by moment. I'll wait. The wolves outside stirred, sensing the shift in the air, their howls rising and falling in a rhythm almost melodic, as if honoring the fragile, budding trust between two wounded hearts. Silver flames in her eyes flickered in response, coiling gently around her like a protective shroud, no longer wild, no longer threatening, but tempered by the quiet intimacy of the firelight, the cave and his unwavering presence. She allowed herself, just for a heartbeat, to lean slightly closer, drawn by the warmth, the safety, the acknowledgement of all the pain and power she carried. And though she did not close the distance fully, did not allow lips to meet, the near touch, the shared breath, the quiet understanding between them was electric, intimate, and irrevocable. I've never let anyone see this side, she admitted, voice breaking faintly. Not really. Not the fear, not the doubt, not the power I'm afraid of losing control over. He shook his head gently, still close, still patient, still holding space for her. Then consider this your first step, he said softly. Not to me, not to the world, but to yourself. To the truth that you can be strong and still be seen. That your fire can be a gift, not a curse. That even someone like me can see you, all of you, and not run. Her chest ached with longing, with fear, with relief. She had survived storms, oceans, exiles, betrayals, but this was something new. Vulnerability, trust, connection. She realized with a jolt that the battle to control her power, to prove herself, to master destiny, it would not be fought alone. And for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could step into the next challenge not as a solitary force, but as part of something stronger, tethered to someone who refused to turn away. The fire crackled, the wolves stirred softly outside, the silver flame in her eyes pulsed gently, and in the quiet, intimate pause between breaths, she and he existed in a fragile, suspended world of understanding, desire, and unspoken promises. Step by step, moment by moment, trust began to root itself where fear had reigned for so long. And though the shadows of the world, the prophecy, the rival packs, the looming storms, waited beyond the cave's protective walls in this moment, she allowed herself something she had not dared in years: hope. The moon hung low, pale and cold, casting ghostly light over the grove where the pack council had convened. The air was thick with expectation, whispers, and distrust, the kind that prickled skin and clawed at the chest. She stepped forward cautiously, silver flames still smoldering faintly in her eyes from the last battle, every nerve alert, every sense screaming caution. She had survived storms, oceans, the biting cold of rejection, but nothing prepared her for the sting of treachery from those she had once called kin. The council gathered, faces shadowed, eyes gleaming with anticipation or malice. It was hard to tell which. She had expected tension. She had not expected venom masked as ritual. The head alpha, once a mentor, once a voice of reason, now stared at her with something she could only describe as calculated contempt. "So she returns," he said, voice calm, deliberately slow, each syllable a blade. "The girl they call the Flame. The one who almost drowned our future in the ice." Her stomach dropped. She had known whispers, rumors, fear. But hearing it spoken aloud with deliberate cruelty shook something inside her, a hollow ache where hope had begun to root. Wolves shifted uneasily behind her, some lowering heads in fear, others baring teeth in cautious defiance. She clenched her fists, the silver flames flaring in response, flickering, restless, alive. "You were warned," the alpha continued, voice rising, echoing in the sacred grove. "Your power, your very bloodline, it was never meant to walk among us freely. Prophecy or not, you are a threat. And threats must be contained." A shiver ran through her chest, a bitter, bitter mix of fear, betrayal, and anger. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might break her ribs. "Threat?" she whispered, the word tasting of ash and salt. "I saved lives today, yet I am the danger? Always the danger." Whispers erupted among the pack council. A rival alpha stepped forward, face twisted, claws glinting in the moonlight. "She is the one the prophecy warns of," he spat, voice dripping venom. "The one who will bind us, or destroy us. Can you trust her? Or will she consume everything we hold sacred?" Her chest constricted. Betrayal burned hotter than fire. The male lead stepped in front of her, his body a shield, dark eyes flashing between fury and indecision. "Enough," he growled, voice low, almost a snarl, but trembling beneath the weight of his own loyalty. She what?" The council interrupted, voices overlapping, accusing, suffocating. "She dares to stand here? She dares to claim control of the prophecy? The power she cannot even master? We trusted her once and she brought chaos. Who can say she will not burn us all?" The words hit her like ice-cold waves. Betrayal. Accusation. The very people she had hoped to belong to had turned against her in an instant. The silver flames in her eyes flared violently, a pulse of energy that rippled outward, tangling with the roots and stones, almost screaming in protest. Her claws dug into the earth beneath her feet, trembling as energy surged, threatening to spill beyond the fragile control she clung to. The male lead hesitated. For a heartbeat the world seemed to freeze. Wolves backed away, fear mingling with awe. He knew the power she carried, had seen glimpses of it in the ocean, in the storm, in the silver fire that refused to be tamed. And now, as the council twisted prophecy against her, accused her of what she had survived, he felt the impossible choice pressing on him. Protect her, defy the pack, risk everything, or step aside, honor the rules, and let her face the wrath of a world that feared what it could not understand. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Fury, grief, and fear collided inside her. The betrayal of those she once trusted, layered atop the weight of prophecy and the risk to the wolves she cared for, ignited something primal, something fierce. The silver flames erupted, spiraling higher, coiling around her body, reflecting the moonlight, the stones, the tense, terrified faces around her. Ocean waves, though distant, seemed to respond, the sound of crashing surf growing louder, merging with the crackle of energy that radiated from her. The council recoiled, some scrambling backward, others bracing, yet still none dared to challenge fully. And she stepped forward, each movement deliberate, each breath a declaration. "You dare call me danger?" Her voice rang out, resonant, unstoppable, shaking the grove itself. "I am the storm you cannot cage. I am the fire you fear. And if you threaten the wolves, if you threaten him, if you threaten me, I will not hold back." The male lead's jaw tightened, a storm of his own raging behind the calm facade. His claws flexed, eyes dark and conflicted, knowing that siding with her could cost him everything he had ever vowed to protect. But the ache in his chest, The tether of bond forming between them over fire, fear and trust anchored him. He would not, turn away. A rival alpha lunged suddenly, claws aimed for her, eyes burning with hatred. The silver flames responded before she even fully realized it, coiling outward, twisting in a dance of light and fury. Ice formed where fire met cold, waves of energy striking the ground, sending wolves stumbling, scattering, howling in shock and awe. The ocean beyond seemed to rise in resonance, distant waves crashing as if summoned by the force of her anger and despair. She moved with lethal grace, energy flowing through her in torrents she had barely begun to understand. Each motion, each pulse, each flicker of silver fire was a fraction of her true power, a taste of what she could become if fully unleashed. Wolves yipped in alarm, some bowing instinctively, some snarling at the unfamiliar surge of energy. The council staggered back, caught between fear and fascination, the world trembling under the weight of her presence. And yet, even in the storm of her own power, her eyes sought him. The male lead remained unwavering, standing as a dark anchor in the chaos, eyes locking with hers, silently telling her that she was not alone, that she did not have to fight the world by herself. A spark of hope, fragile but insistent, threaded through her fury. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I am not your sacrifice," she said, voice loud, resonant, carrying across the grove and into the night sky. "I am not a threat to be caged. I am the force you cannot comprehend. And if you stand against me, you will witness the power you tried to deny." The council gasped, some wolves retreating further, others frozen in awe. The male lead shifted closer, ready to intervene, yet giving her space to claim the moment, to assert the first real taste of her autonomy and strength. Energy swirled around her, the silver flames lashing outward, ocean waves in the distance growing in resonance. A crescendo of raw, untamed power that seemed almost alive. And then just as suddenly the world seemed to pause, suspended in the charged silence after the outburst. Wolves yipped nervously, council members stared, and the male lead's dark eyes reflected both fear and pride. She had unleashed only a fraction of what she could do, but that fraction was enough to make them all hesitate, enough to make them remember the girl they had dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed. Her chest heaved. Exhaustion mingled with exhilaration, fear with triumph. She had faced betrayal, faced accusation, faced those who would have cast her aside, and she had risen. The grove trembled with the residual echoes of her power, the moonlight glinting off silver flames still lingering in the shadows, reflecting in her eyes that burned with fury, pain, and determination. And as the council backed away, whispering among themselves as rival alphas assessed the danger they had underestimated, she took one last resolute breath. The male lead's presence beside her was the tether she clung to, the promise that even in the fury of betrayal, even in the storm of prophecy twisted against her, she was not alone. Her gaze swept across the grove, over the trembling wolves, the fearful pack members, and she whispered to herself, almost a vow, almost a prayer, "They will remember me. They will know my name. And I will not be broken." The night sky was fractured with storm clouds, heavy and dark, swirling as if the heavens themselves had sensed the chaos below. The ocean roared in the distance, waves crashing against frozen rocks with a fury that mirrored the turmoil in her chest. Wolves howled in panic, scattered and endangered, their frantic cries piercing the air as the ritual reached its crescendo. Flames from torches flickered in the wind, casting long, sinister shadows that danced across the battlefield, revealing the twisted forms of shadow beasts and rival alphas encroaching on the pack's territory. She arrived at the edge of the chaos, her form barely visible through the storm's icy curtain. Her breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, heart hammering not from fatigue but anticipation. This was the moment she had been preparing for, through exile, through betrayal, through every moment of fear and doubt. She would not hesitate. She would not falter. And this time there would be no running. Silver flames ignited along her arms, flickering upward, coiling like serpents of pure light, responding to the surge of adrenaline and determination that burned through her veins. The wolves paused mid-stride, noses twitching, ears alert, instinctively recognizing the source of the power. An aura older than the oldest pack, fiercer than the harshest ocean storm. Even those who had doubted, feared, or opposed her felt the undeniable presence of something unstoppable. Her eyes, blazing like molten silver under the storm's pale light, scanned the battlefield, Some wolves were trapped in surging ocean waves, struggling to stay afloat, while others were ensnared by shadow beasts, claws sinking into fur, teeth snapping dangerously close. And at the center of it all, the ritual altar, a swirling vortex of dark magic, pulsating with a threat that sought to consume everything she had fought for, stood poised to unleash ruin. She inhaled sharply, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every whispered accusation, every wound, both physical and emotional, fueling the surge of energy that spiraled outward from her chest. Her voice rang out, a declaration that cut through the storm like lightning. "I am not your sacrifice." The words were more than defiance. They were the embodiment of her power, her resolve, her destiny. The silver flames responded, exploding outward in a wave of blinding light, coiling around the wolves and lifting them from danger. Ocean waves recoiled, bending to her will, icy water surging around the trapped creatures and carrying them to safety. Shadow beasts yelped, recoiling instinctively from the intensity of her aura, their forms flickering, unstable in the presence of raw, uncontrolled, but brilliantly manifested, power. The male lead emerged beside her, claws extended, body tense, yet his gaze never wavered from her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, voice deep, almost trembling with awe. But she shook her head, silver flames licking higher around her, illuminating every curve of her figure, every line of focus, every pulse of intent. "No," she said, voice resonant, commanding. "This is mine. I am the fire they sought to cage. I am the storm they feared to face. I will not bow. I will not hide. And I will not be their sacrifice." With that declaration, the ground beneath them trembled. Ancient ruins, hidden and long forgotten, awoke in response to her surge of energy. Stones quivered, cracks spiderwebbing across the earth as if acknowledging the presence of the one the prophecy had marked. Light burst through the storm clouds, piercing the night in columns of silver and gold that reflected off the ocean's waves, the firelit grove, the scattered pack, and the distant mountains. Wolves howled in reverence, some bowing instinctively, others circling protectively, sensing a leader not born of fear but of indomitable will. She moved forward, every step deliberate, every pulse of flame weaving a tapestry of light and energy around her. Shadow beasts lunged, but she was faster, silver flames coiling like living steel, striking with precision, sending them crashing backward. Rival alphas faltered, the force of her presence undeniable, overwhelming, mesmerizing. And yet she did not lose herself in the rage. Control mingled with fury, mastery dancing on the edge of raw power, every motion a symphony of destruction and protection simultaneously. The male lead followed, moving in tandem with her, a dark anchor in the brilliance of her fire. His claws struck, his teeth flashed, but it was her energy, her will, her reclamation of self that truly turned the tide. Wolves freed from danger surged around her, following instinctively, responding to the magnetic pull of her command. Some of the most hesitant and fearful bowed before her, recognizing not a girl, not a threat, but a force beyond understanding, a power tempered by courage, heart, and a desire to protect those she loved. She reached the ritual altar, the source of dark energy that had threatened to undo everything. Silver flames erupted from her hands, coiling like serpents around the dark constructs, the energy of the ocean itself twisting in resonance, lifting, scattering, dissolving the shadow of the ritual. The storm above seemed to howl in triumph, lightning splitting the clouds, rain mingling with spray, every drop reflecting the firelight in dazzling arcs. And then finally the true villain emerged, a towering figure of darkness, eyes gleaming with malice, aura radiating control over shadows and beasts alike. A hush fell over the battlefield as the villain's presence pressed down, heavy and suffocating, yet she did not waver. She could feel the culmination of every hardship, every betrayal, every ounce of power she had restrained until now, coiling in her chest, ready to be unleashed fully. Her gaze met his, unwavering, silver flames licking higher, ocean waves rising in resonance with her intent. Wolves circled, instincts screaming warnings and allegiance in equal measure. The ground trembled beneath the intensity of the confrontation, stones shifting, lightning arcing across the sky, and she realized with a clarity that burned through all doubt. This was no longer about survival, no longer about proving herself to the world. This was about claiming who she was, embracing every ounce of her power and protecting everything she had chosen to love. "I am not your sacrifice," she repeated, voice echoing across the grove, the battlefield, and into the storm above. The villain faltered just slightly, sensing the storm rising against him, the raw, unyielding determination that radiated from her like a living force of nature. The male lead's presence remained at her side, but she did not rely on him. This was her fight. Her power. Her destiny. And as silver flames licked the edges of the altar, as waves of energy pulsed outward, as wolves rallied instinctively around her, it became undeniable. She had claimed herself. She was fire and storm and ocean and light. She was the one they had feared, the one the prophecy had marked, and she would no longer hide. The villain's eyes narrowed, a low growl emanating from his dark form, and for a heartbeat, the battlefield paused in suspended anticipation. The clash was imminent, the stakes higher than ever. But she did not flinch. Not now. Not ever. She was no longer a girl of doubt, no longer a pawn in a prophecy twisted by fear. She was power incarnate, and the world would remember that night, the night she claimed her fire, her destiny, and the right to stand unbroken. And with that, the battlefield held its breath, the storm above and the silver flames below waiting for the first strike that would decide everything, leaving every heartbeat in suspense, and every listener on the edge aching to know what would happen next. The storm had quieted, though the air still trembled with the echoes of silver flames and crashing waves, the aftermath of her unleashed power leaving ripples across the grove and the ocean beyond. Wolves moved cautiously now, some bowing, some circling, sensing the undeniable shift in the balance of power, in the very heartbeat of the night. The battlefield was no longer just stones, water, and shadow. It was charged with the pulse of destiny, heavy with choices that none could ignore. She stood at the center, chest heaving, hair plastered to her face by rain and sweat, silver flames still flickering faintly in her eyes as if reluctant to fade entirely. The male lead remained close, silent, unwavering, the quiet shadow to her brilliant fire, yet even his presence could not shield her from the weight of judgment that lingered in the air. The council had retreated, rival alphas withdrew, the villain lurked in the shadows, eyes narrow, teeth gleaming, but it was not them who haunted her now. It was the question of the world itself. The world that would witness her power, that would whisper her name in fear, in awe, in reverence, in hatred. The world that demanded she be either hero or monster. The world that had always asked her to choose a side before she was even ready to claim her own heart. Her gaze swept across the battlefield, catching every trembling wolf, every distant ripple of storm-tossed waves, every flicker of torchlight that now seemed insignificant compared to the pulse of silver fire in her chest. She realized then, with a raw, almost unbearable clarity, that this was no longer about proving herself to the pack or even to the prophecy. It was about existence itself. About being seen, understood, feared, loved, and still choosing to move forward. And yet, in that clarity, a tremor of doubt crept in. Would they ever accept her? Could they? The male lead's hand hovered near hers, silent, patient, a tether to hope, a reminder that trust could exist even in chaos. But he could not fight for her against the world. Not entirely. That choice, the choice to stand with her, to follow her fire, was something the world had to make on its own. Her lips parted slightly, not in speech, but in the inhalation of a moment so tense, so infinite, that the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The shadows stirred, the ocean whispered, the wolves remained poised and alert, as if the very heartbeat of the night paused to witness the quiet, fragile space where power, trust, and destiny intersected. "Would you have chosen her?" she whispered inwardly, voice almost lost in the fading rumble of distant waves. "Or feared her too?" The question hung in the air, unspoken to the pack, unasked of the rival alphas, yet it was for every listener, every witness, every heartbeat attuned to the tension of the moment. It was a question of courage, of empathy, of the capacity to see past fire, past fury, past fear, and recognize the girl who had clawed her way through ice, betrayal, and prophecy to stand unbroken. Is she hero or cursed? Another thought, sharper this time, slicing through the heavy silence. Could the world allow a girl to be both? Could hearts understand the delicate dance of power and vulnerability, strength and fear? He did not know. She had survived the storm, mastered a fraction of her power, saved lives, and yet the judgment of the world, the ultimate verdict, remained suspended, as uncertain as the flicker of silver flames across the ruins. The male lead's presence beside her was a quiet answer, A subtle pulse of loyalty that reminded her that some choices could be made without the world's permission. His gaze met hers, steady, unwavering, a silent declaration. I choose you. Not hero, not cursed. Just you. And that tether, fragile and precious, made her pulse with a warmth she had not dared feel in years. And so she waited. For the verdict. For the fear, the awe, the understanding, the reverence. For the world to decide whether she would be embraced, or hunted. For the shadows to stir, for the villain to make the next move. For the story to continue and for her destiny to unfold. If your heart beat faster in the storm, if your soul felt the pull of fire and ocean, if the ache of betrayal and the thrill of trust struck something deep inside you, then you know why stories like hers matter. Because they remind us that even in the coldest night, even when the world casts us aside, even when power is feared and love is dangerous, there is a choice. A side to take. A heart to follow. If this story burned in your soul, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that sear your heart, that make you ache, hope, and believe again in the fire that lives within us all. Will you choose her side, or watch from the shadows, afraid of what she has become? And as the silver flames dimmed just enough to reveal her face, resolute and unbroken, the wind whispered a warning, a promise, a lingering question. The battle was not over, the villain still waited, and the true story, her story, had only just begun. The battlefield had quieted, yet the air was thick with residual energy. Smoke from shattered torches mingled with the salty tang of ocean spray, and the faint glow of silver flames still shimmered in the mist. Wolves padded cautiously around her, some circling protectively, others retreating, ears pricked, bodies tense, sensing that though the immediate danger had passed, something far greater was stirring just beyond sight. She walked slowly, each step deliberate, boots sinking slightly into the wet sand, claws brushing against jagged rocks, muscles taut with exhaustion and exhilaration. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths, heart still thrumming with the residual surge of power. Every nerve screamed awareness, every fiber of her being alert, even in the lull. Around her, the storm had begun to abate, but the wind still carried the whispers of the night. Soft, mocking, prophetic, as if nature itself were warning that the world had not finished testing her. The male lead stayed by her side, his presence a steady anchor. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, sharp, wary, protective. Yet even his vigilant calm could not erase the creeping tension in her chest. The knowledge that the victory had been only temporary, that the shadows had not fully retreated, and that the prophecy she had begun to embrace was far from complete. Ahead, the ruins of the ritual altar stood twisted, scarred by silver flames and the force of her unleashed power. Stones cracked, etched with ancient markings that seemed to pulse faintly in response to her presence, whispering secrets she had yet to understand. Ocean waves lapped at the base of the altar, restless, as if stirred by an invisible hand, the water reflecting streaks of moonlight and lingering silver fire. Wolves lifted heads, ears flicking, sensing the tremor beneath the earth. Something else had awoken. Something waiting. Her steps slowed, and for a heartbeat she let herself feel the weight of everything she had endured. Betrayal, isolation, near death, the relentless fear of her own power, and the first stirring of trust and connection. Each memory cut through her, a mixture of pain and pride. She had survived storms, literal and figurative. She had defied a world that had branded her dangerous. She had claimed her power. But as the wind whispered through broken stones and scattered sand, she knew the fight was far from over. A tremor shivered through the ground, subtle at first, then insistent, growing beneath her feet. Wolves froze mid-step, tails stiffening, eyes wide, noses lifted as if sniffing the very earth for danger. The male lead's hand tightened near hers, claws flexing slightly, muscles coiled, yet he did not speak. He simply let the tremor pass through him, a silent acknowledgement that this was bigger than either of them, bigger than any pack, bigger than even the prophecy had hinted. Then it came, the voice. Low, almost imperceptible at first, carried by wind and shadow, curling through the ruins and across the lapping ocean waves. She is not the only one. The words slithered through the night, chilling, prophetic, carrying a weight that pressed against her chest. Every hair on her arms and neck rose. Wolves barked sharply, ears flattening, tails whipping in nervous tension. Her eyes narrowed, silver flames flickering with recognition and challenge. The voice had no face, Yet it resonated with authority, menace, and something almost expectant. She turned slightly, scanning the darkness beyond the grove, beyond the ocean's edge, searching for any sign of form or presence. Nothing moved, yet the tremor continued beneath the ground, rhythmic, deliberate, like the heartbeat of something ancient and powerful. The male lead mirrored her movements, senses razor-sharp, alert, but his calm aura was tempered with unspoken concern. He did not need to speak. The tremor and the voice said enough. The story was far from over. Her fists clenched, silver flames licking the edges of her knuckles, pulse pounding with a mixture of determination and unease. "Not the only one," she whispered, tasting the words on her tongue. Was it an ally? A rival? Another force waiting in the shadows, shaped by prophecy or by some darker intent? Her body coiled, instincts screaming readiness, mind racing with strategy and anticipation. The wolves moved closer, circling in instinctive protection, while distant shadows in the trees flickered, unclaimed shapes that could be wind or could be far more. She could feel the undercurrent of energy building, subtle yet undeniable, like a storm gathering at sea beyond the horizon. Her silver flames responded, flickering higher in instinctual acknowledgement of danger. Beside her, the male lead's hand brushed hers briefly, not as a comfort but as a silent pact. They had faced betrayal, they had faced near death, they had faced a world that had doubted and feared her. Together they had emerged stronger, and yet the tremor, the voice, the shadows whispered that their greatest trials were still to come. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension coil through her and then settle, the muscles in her shoulders relaxing just enough to feel the raw pulse of power beneath her skin. Every step forward was deliberate, every gaze scanned the night, every instinct alert. The ocean whispered at the shore, waves folding over one another, reflecting flickers of moonlight and the faint glow of silver fire that still lingered in the ruins. Wolves padded around her, silent sentinels, aware that the calm was only temporary, aware that the storm's echo still lingered in every shadow. And then, faintly, carried on the wind, another fragment of the voice. "The true alpha hasn't risen, yet." Her eyes narrowed, silver flames flaring brighter, casting a brilliant glow across jagged stones and trembling sand. She felt it deep in her chest, a resonance that intertwined with every heartbeat, every pulse of the ocean, every tremor beneath the ground. It was a warning. It was a challenge. It was prophecy calling out, promising trials she had not yet imagined, battles she had not yet fought, and powers she had only begun to touch. The male lead shifted closer, protective yet deferential, understanding that this moment belonged to her, that the rising threat, the tremor in the earth and the voice of shadows were all hers to face, to interpret, to conquer. He did not speak, only watched, the tension in his dark eyes reflecting the same recognition. The path forward was uncertain, the stakes immeasurable, and the story far from over. She turned her gaze toward the ocean, toward the horizon where storm clouds still clung, dark and restless, the waves echoing the heartbeat of the world. Wolves at her side lifted heads, ears forward, claws digging into wet sand as if sensing the threads of destiny that reached beyond their understanding. The air hummed with possibility, danger, and potential, the night itself seeming to hold its breath in anticipation. A shiver ran down her spine, not from cold but from awareness. This was only the beginning. She had claimed her power, proven her resolve, and survived betrayal. But the world, the prophecy, and the forces lurking in shadow were not finished with her. The tremor continued beneath the ground. The faint glow of ruins pulsed in response to her presence, and the wind carried the lingering echo of those words, haunting, prophetic, inevitable. She is not the only one. The true alpha hasn't risen, yet. Her pulse quickened not from fear but from readiness. She would rise. She would face whatever waited in the shadows. And she would do it on her own terms, tethered to the male lead by trust and bond, but guided by the silver flame that was wholly hers. And as the camera of imagination lingers, the night stretching wide and ominous, the ocean whispering, the wolves circling, and shadows stirring in unseen corners, the audience feels it too. The story is far from over. The next chapter waits, larger, darker, more compelling than anything yet experienced. Every heart races, every breath catches, every mind aches to know what comes next. And in that suspended, tense, electric silence, one truth becomes undeniable. This tale, this heroine, this rising fire of silver and storm, is only just beginning.